I think Mary Ann would like to move up to this table so she could lip read.
Yeah.
It'd be easier for her.
I was just wondering if she had an interpreter. Yeah. She looks very-
She usually just does this lip reading.
All right, then I'll try to talk in that direction.
Yeah.
Talk to my computer. So thanks for that.
Weird, but it's not. We have to change that.
Right. It should be showing up on this screen.
All right.
So we're gonna slide this chair.
So, yeah, hold yourself up. There's more room over here.
Yeah,
Scoot
no,
over. Sarah
Before
can
it said
scoot
no
over.
signal.
Oh, okay.
Hey, there we go. I changed it. So, how would you like that? You want that? How would you like this camera?
Oh, yeah. that would be-
Gary, how do you normally have a camera against?
Focus,
Lady who never calls me
focus
back.
on news right here on the screen. So, yeah. So, you can see it here. And mic on. I'm just about to just. Fantastic. And I'm going to go ahead and mute it.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess we'll go ahead and, if you haven't signed in, there's a sign up sheet here. We are lucky to have with us a couple of really interesting speakers today to talk about flipped classroom. If you're not familiar with the concept, I'm not going to introduce that part of it. I'll let you guys do that. But the whole notion of flipping a classroom changes how you approach content and interaction with your students. And it's actually been around for a while. It's shown up under a variety of different names. But it really got started about 9 years ago, kind of officially, and there's lots of resources. There actually is a page here that if you want to pick up on the way out, I just did a little front and back page on 4 pillars of work called Flip from the Flip Learning Network. Great, Flip a little bit more info, but there's pizza here. I'm gonna turn it over to Denise Thorsen and Sarah Hayes, and thanks for being here.
Okay, so I'm going to start. Afternoon, everybody. I'm Denise Thorsen. I teach in engineering, and Sarah Hayes teaches in chemistry. And we're just going to sort of share our experiences with doing the flipped classroom in our own classes. Sarah and I met a couple of years ago as part of a faculty learning community on flipped classrooms, where the intent was to support each other in our learning of how to use this pedagogy in our classrooms. And so when we did, we learned a lot from each other. And based off of that experience, then we put together a one-day workshop that we put on last August. To fairly good success, and we have a website with a lot of resources on it called Flip Community, Flip.community, UAF.edu or something like that. Anyway, we'll link later on. We'll send you the link later on. Anyway, where we basically have regurgitated all of our brain power onto a piece of paper so that other people can read it. All right, and based off of my participating in last month's, I think at this point we're supposed to go around the classroom and get everybody to introduce yourselves and figure out what your goal is. And then we'll just talk for a very short period of time and hopefully open it up for questions, because I'm pretty sure that's what you guys all want. So how about let's start at the child's table. Desiree, you wanna set us up? And just tell us who you are, where you teach, and
No target here.
yeah.
I'm Desiree Simons, and I'm an assistant professor in the developmental education department of CRCD.
I'm Aldi Norris. I am an adjunct over at CTC. I teach communication courses.
I'm Chris Becks, instructional designer at eLearning. That took me a little while.
Emily Meindorf. I'm a postdoc at the Institute of Arctic Biology.
I'm Jason Gissmeyer. I'm a postdoc in fisheries.
Nicole, you want to start this table or?
I can start. I'm Kathy Donor. I teach American Sign Language here. Marianne, Karen, TJ, so.
I'm Courtney Sherback. I'm a graduate student in biology.
Bob Perkins is civil environmental engineering.
Marika Guthrie, Art Department and Museum.
All right, so Sarah is going to start us off.
So hopefully, maybe you guys have heard about Bloom's taxonomy. And so basically, this is sort of a way of teaching from or classifying learning activities all the way from just remembering, all the way up in increasing sort of difficulty and just increasing difficulty into creating. And so if we think about Bloom's taxonomy and how we use traditional classroom sort of traditional methods, what we might have students be doing outside of classes, which you hope that they do, right, is to read before class, they come to lecture, and then they go home and do their homework. Well, in reality, we all know that it looks a lot more like this because students don't generally read. And so that leaves us with doing lecture where we have to start at sort of basically the ground zero with the lowest levels of Bloom's taxonomy and Bloom's learning. And so that's what we can do, start with in class. And so then that leaves any kind of higher level learning for something that happens outside of class. And the lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy is not really where your students need you. They need you for the higher order stuff where they're trying to synthesize, put concepts together, and actually apply them. And so instead, we'd like to propose a flipped model where you do the lowest levels of Bloom's taxonomy outside of class. And this isn't really that's not that novel, right? Because we were always hoping that they would read the textbook before they got to class, so that we could engage them at this really, so that they're ready to be engaged at a higher level in class. And that's just not where we're at right now with the traditional teaching. And so with the flipped classroom, we enforce that they do the lowest levels of learning the content outside of class before they come to class, so that then you have time during class to engage the students where we always wanted to engage them, which is sort of at the mid to higher levels of learning for Bloom's taxonomy. And then they can even go home and do continue doing higher level activities and practicing. So, what this might look like is we might force them to do the readings out of class, looking at videos, taking notes, practicing maybe some simplistic homework problems to sort of assess their own learning. And then when they get to class, then you have all of them captive in a room for 3 hours a week. And so you can do things like practicing problems, you can make them group together, you can make them discuss, and then at home they can go back home and do additional practices. Practice problems, or even move up to the highest level of Bloom's taxonomy where they're actually creating something. So basically, we're just flipping the class so that the activities that were traditionally taking place in class are now pushed to before class, and making room in class to do active learning and do all the activities that you always wanted to do but never had time for. And then they can go home and practice a little bit more to make sure that they have mastered the content. Yep. So there are some potential stumbling blocks, and hopefully we're going to address some of these today. One is that students don't buy into the model. And usually what that looks like is grouchy students and or students that don't prepare for class because they don't have to prepare for any of their other classes in the way that we're asking them to prepare in this flipped model. Students not attending lectures because why would they? All of the content is online. Then also there's instructors can be crushed but under the weight of course preparation because it can be very time intensive, depending on how you choose to implement it. Implementing a flipped classroom can be very time intensive. And so we'll offer some insight into that as well. And then there's also sort of physical constraints of a classroom that sometimes it's not so easy to get them to work in groups or whatnot, something like a large lecture hall isn't necessarily conducive to the flipped method. But it can certainly be done. So we're going to offer you a couple of examples. I flipped chemistry 212 chemical equilibrium and analysis for 3 years. And Denise, you're in your 3rd year, right?
I'm in my 3rd year.
So we've both been doing this for 3 years with our respective classes. So let me tell you a little bit more about my class, which is chemical equilibrium and analysis. So the goal of this class is for students to master statistics and equilibrium calculations. And if you're feeling intimidated by just how that sounds, so are my students. They've just made it through general chemistry, many of them by the skin of their teeth, and they are petrified of doing statistics and thinking critically about data, and then also equilibrium calculations. They're pretty scary. And they're all very relieved when we get to the more qualitative instrumental section of the course. So the reason that I chose to flip was, this is perfect, thank you, was that I wanted time in class for them to work together. I really believe that working in small groups can lower the activation barrier for learning and really facilitate students working together. I mean, I know from my own schooling that, we'd be set to work in a group or something, and I'd be like, man, I don't even know how to start this problem, but I think that it has something to do with this thing that I have in my notes here. And then my neighbor would be like, oh yeah, that's totally right. Oh yeah. And so then together we were able to actually make progress on what would otherwise have been a really difficult problem where probably I would have just quit. So I have a lot of sympathy for my students who are in that same situation, and I don't want them struggling at home by themselves at night when they're tired. I want them to do the struggling to learn in class where I'm watching them. They don't have the option of checking Facebook, and they have me and their peers both for support and also for accountability. I also want them to be able to get instant feedback from me and from their peers, so that, when they say, I don't know how to do this, but I think, I can instantaneously say, yes, that's great, get a cookie. Or, hey, I didn't get the right answer, and then I can immediately say, oh, look, you dropped a sign here. And so that's the kind of interaction that I was trying to support. I also wanted time in class to do more practice problems because I think that that's a really useful activity, and to go into more in-depth descriptions of some of the course material. So let me show you what my buckets for this look like. Before coming to class, I want my students to either watch the video or read the text and fill in a worksheet that is graded for completion. And so the worksheets would include some stuff like definitions, equations, and easy practice problems. So let me show you sort of the way that I do this. So here's a video. Hopefully it'll work.
Let's talk about solubility properties. So case of equilibrium.
Not perfect.
It's not like a solid that isn't going to dissolve all the way. So it's also called KSP. So for K, the equilibrium constant of the solubility product. And basically it's where you put some kind of solid in some water usually. And by equilibrium.
So is that embedded in your PowerPoint slide?
Not all of it.
It is right now.
So
That's not for the
if you say
students that watch this before class.
saturated with respect to the solid, whatever the
Right,
solid
but do they get the PowerPoints?
No, they get I booked for this class because I'm not as snazzy with Blackboard as Denise. And so they go to whatever day it is and there's a link to the appropriate videos.
Okay.
So it's really obvious, but they're not embedded in PowerPoint. So then they would watch, this is a shortened version of a video, but there may be six minutes long on average, which is about the right length for this kind of video. Keep them short, keep them one topic at a time, and keep them moving forward. So I did a lot of research to try to figure out how to make the kind of videos that I wanted to watch, and I watched. So the way that I do it is a Phys method. I have like a little easel type thing in my office. And so I just write out these whiteboards beforehand, set it up with my iPhone. You can see it's very high tech. I have a couple of textbooks and a stick and some ticky-tack. And I've made hundreds of hours, well, maybe not hundreds of hours, but a lot of video content this way. It doesn't have to be high tech, and it's my phone. So, and they're high enough quality to be useful, certainly to the students. And so I just write out the activity that whatever I'm going to talk about on the whiteboard, so I'm not distracted by writing, because I can either write and talk, or I can write and think, but not all three at the same time. So writing, thinking, and talking can't all occur at the same time. So I got to separate those processes. So they would watch a video like the example that I just showed you, and then fill out a worksheet. And the worksheet for this video looks something like this. So just, these are simple equations. Just asking them, did you read the video, or did you read or watch the video enough to get the basic concepts? And so this would be graded basically for completion.
So do they have a textbook as well and would have that equation in it if they didn't pick it up from the video? Or
Absolutely, yeah. There's great textbooks for this kind of class. So analytical chemistry is a very standard topic, and so yes, we use the textbook a lot. Yeah, so this is what we would do all before coming to class. In class, we might do a creative dance that illustrates solubility product. And so there's several, the video didn't go into it, but there's several concepts that need to be covered. The student version of the video does go into them, but and we do a creative dance that they make up on the spot to illustrate some of these concepts. Then we have a detailed discussion of those certain cases, and then they work. I might work a really complicated example of a solubility product problem that's not so simple as what they did on the worksheet before class. Then they would work in small groups, and then at the end of class we would maybe go over a problem or two that they had worked on in their small groups. And then after class there would be additional graded problems that they would be assigned to do. So basically how this works is that the way that I've sorted my content is that I want them to watch a video lecture or read the chapter in the textbook before coming to class. I want them to do the worksheet that just helps them sort of organize and collect the right facts, the things I want them to the material that I want them to key in on. And then helps them identify questions for when they do come to class. Say, oh, this part was really confusing for us. And so always we start with questions. And then they do their homework, or homework is due at the beginning of class. That can either be the worksheet or additional practice problems from a previous day. They work in groups and problems, and then we might review examples or problems at the end of class. And then they can go home and review the text or the video as they need to in order to complete the rest of the remainder of the problems. Yeah. Okay.
So I'm going to talk about. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, are there questions?
I don't have a question. So for that model, would that be if you meet 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you do that exact same model? So like example, Tuesday they'd be preparing for the next lecture and doing their homework.
Yeah.
Or would you assign a whole week?
So normally I have homework due once a week, and so we just build. So the assignment builds up, and then it's due like the next Monday or something.
Okay.
Yeah, I try to do it every day, and the students are pretty resistant to having homework and a worksheet due every day. It's a lot for them to sort of keep on top of. So it's better. I've found that my students are happier, and I'm just as happy with the results if I have the homework just due once a week.
Yeah, so just to actually follow up on that, so the homework that's due in class versus the homework that's due at home, can you just explain the difference a little bit?
Yeah, so every day there's some kind of worksheet type of thing that's due to make sure that they have done what they were supposed to do outside of class.
So that's somewhere in class.
So there's worksheets that are due at the beginning of class, and then there's additional practice problems that would only be due once a week that they would be expected to do after class. Did you have a question? No? Okay.
So you collect the worksheet at the beginning of the class?
I just check it off.
Check it off.
Because I'm not lecturing, right?
Right.
So as soon as I finish, sort of getting the class up and going, I just wander around. That's what I'm going to do anyways. And I just say, hey, let me see your worksheet. Oh yeah, did you have any questions? Oh, how's your group doing?
So you use the worksheet basically to make sure they did the
out of class,
the class.
The pre-class reading or interacted with that content.
Now, years ago, he used to have an assignment that at the beginning of every class he'd have a quiz about the reading assignment, the stuff you were supposed to read to Because if you just tell students to read it, they don't read it. So this is another way to do it. So this is a use of, but that was always textbook reading. Here, you're getting them to do videos and things, and you're doing other things. But it's the same concept. It's still, you've got to have this worksheet at the beginning of class to make sure they, to encourage them to do what they're supposed to do. Right?
I think we're going to address that
Okay.
going forward, but yeah.
That's the idea. I mean, yeah, okay.
Partially.
I've also experimented with having the students stand up and talk about what they're supposed to have read and done, and because they react much more to peer pressure sometimes than they do to ours, you know. But it's the same concept. So a key to this flipped classroom is you have to have some way near the front of assessing that they.
So because I'm going to address a lot of, we had this list, and we'll come back to this list about what all the problems are. How do you make it work, right? Having students come prepared to class is a problem for any class, right? Yeah. And there's lots of ways you can address this, your quiz or whatever. I never wanted to take up my class time with a 15-minute quiz. All of a sudden, 15 minutes of my class time was done. The flipped classroom is a way to engage in active learning, which is also something you mentioned. It's just a method of forcing that into the classroom. It's not the best thing since sliced bread. It's just a modality. Any way that you can get active learning into the classroom is a plus. And whether you do it by flipped classroom in this particular format, or whether you do it in any other format that we used to do in any classroom to just get active engagement, right? So anyway, I'm going to talk about my freshman class. I teach freshman electrical engineering, primarily to guys, because most of the engineering students are guys. And they have a couple of problems, one of which is that they are not socially connected to themselves or other people. That this picture of working, the Dilbert picture of working in cubicles, yes, that's my students. That's a lot of parallel play, not a lot of, supporting of each other. And I wanted to address that because we have an ABET criteria. Our accreditation says that my students have to be able to work on multidisciplinary teams. And when they come in as freshmen, they don't want to even talk to each other, in this way. So I had actually as an engineering professor, I had a social mission to make my students work together. And I saw flipped classroom as a way to do this. Also as a freshman, they needed a lot of support in how to approach problems, how to do problem solving. The content of my class, I can give you the 5 equations, which are my class, in the first day of school. All right, and then we take the rest of the semester using those 5 equations. The actual content is not very deep. It's kind of a survey class. But there's all these other stuff about, yes, you have to turn in your homework. Yes, you have to talk to your partner. Yes, you have to be able to work in teams. Yes, you have to do all of these other things that you have to do to be successful at the university level. And as freshmen, my students didn't know how to do that, right? And so this was my way of attempting to force them to grow up, all right? The other thing that this classroom does, so I talked about that it modeled diversity, and I was really interested in getting students to work together and teach each other because, I'm really far removed from my students, and Bob, you probably are too these days. I'm close to 40 years older than my students are these days, which means that I've been doing engineering for 40 years longer than they have, which means that I don't know what they don't know anymore. It's such a second language to me that it's hard for me to put myself in their place and understand where they're confused. I'm like, for Christ's sake, Ohm's law is Ohm's law. How come you don't know this? Don't you know how to tie your shoes? To me, it's at that level, and they don't know it, okay? So when I force them to work for each other, then I get comments like this. Oftentimes I teach my partners. This is an actual quote, spring of 2015. Other times my partner teaches me, right? But the fact of the matter is that they teach themselves better than I can teach them because they're confused in the same way, right? And so I wanted to engage that type of a learning environment in the classroom where I was there to make sure they didn't get derailed too far, okay? But I wanted them to experience the stress of learning how to learn themselves, okay? Now, back to Sarah's problems. Students are not prepared for this. And in fact, the first year I attempted to do this, I had a complete revolt in my classroom. It was really quite horrible, right? And so if you're going to make a drastic change from your classroom, you really have to prepare the students. Because the fact of the matter is this is what students feel like when they come into your classroom and they say, what, you're not lecturing anymore? I can't come in here and sit passively and absorb information anymore? You're gonna make me work? I have to bring my calculator? They're not prepared for this, and quite honestly, they are afraid. I don't know how to work in this modality. I'm gonna fail the class. They're betrayed. How dare you switch it up? I was prepared for a lecture, and they are absolutely angry. And if you don't prepare them for the change, it will not go well for you, right? And so I have taken it on to prepare them. So they absolutely need to be prepared. You have to focus on that. You cannot just flip your classroom and think your students will follow you, all right? You have to be prepared. I send a welcome email prior to the first day of class, and it has an assignment in it that they need to have done by the first day of class, and I'll show it to you, all right? I set the expectation on the first day of class. I never lecture, not once. I don't even do the syllabus, okay? I make sure that they are set prior to class, that they know exactly what they're getting into. And I reinforce expectations in terms of after the first exam, I show them how much more A's I could give this semester than I could give in pre-flip classroom semesters. Okay, and I show them that data. My students as engineers are very data driven. And so when they see the data, they're more willing to engage. And finally, I stay the course. I don't blink. Sarah and I talk about this a lot. You don't blink. As much pushback as you get, you stay the course, they will come around eventually. So this is hugely important. What do I do first? I send them a welcome email and I tell them, EE 102 is different, okay? We're gonna do the flipped classroom. That means you are responsible for your learning, which is another thing I want students to learn. And this is why I'm doing this. And so I tell them why I'm doing this. It is better for you if I do this, okay? And so they get this before the first day of class. And this last part of that has assignments. Send me an email that you got this. Do this I do pre and post class assessment. So do this pre-class assessment. They're already having to be actively involved and semester hasn't even started, okay? First day of class, I got this from Sarah, we do Jeopardy. I do not talk about how the class is gonna go. I did that in the email. I do not read the syllabus to them. I told them to go to Blackboard and read it. So what do? Is we jump right into Jeopardy. They pick their categories, and what the Jeopardy question is where do you find information? How do you know when the first exam is? Where is your homework turned in? And they have to answer those questions. So I never lecture, all right? So what does my class look like? I ask them to either watch the lecture or read the chapter. Again, I don't care which they do. If they like to read books, they can read the chapter. If they don't like to read books, yes, I have lectures. Different type of lectures than what Sarah does, but I'll show you that. All right, I don't care which one you do. I tell them they should take notes on it and bring those notes to class with a calculator, a piece of paper, and a pencil because we're working problems. And if your note sheet doesn't have the equation you need on it, then you can fix it. And guess what? Then that note sheet's good for your first exam. They also have to do a pre-class assessment, which is graded, which is due before the beginning of class. So that's my quiz, if you will, right? that they've done this, is the pre-class is not due before every class. I have modules, and I'll show you this. It's due per module. So I have 1 week modules about, right? So the pre-class is due at before the first class of the first module, of the first class of the module, right? And then we work that module, and then they have homework at the end of the module, right? Then what do we do in class? I say, what did you learn? What are your questions? And we have maybe a 5-minute discussion at the beginning where they tell me what's in the module. Okay? Then we work in pairs, and I pair them up because they refuse to pair on themselves because they're engineering guys, and they will not work with each other if they could help it. So I pair them up, and I swap the pairs every module, so that they have to work with everybody in the class. They're not just working with their buddy, all right? I want them to hear everybody, right? So I pair them up, and we do problems, and I'll show you some of those. And at the end, out of class, they do have homework that is due, which is Blackboard graded. So they get automatic feedback in whether they're right or wrong, and they can do the homework as many times as they want until they get it right, up to the due date, which is 5 o'clock Friday afternoon. And the first year I did 5 o'clock Friday afternoon, and they said, what about, can't I do it till midnight? And I said, no, because I want Friday evening off, and I don't want to be answering your questions. So budget your time appropriately, right? So what does my class look like? I'm an engineer, so I'm highly structured. I use Blackboard not because I like it, but because it exists. And so I work within the environment that I have. And every single one of my modules looks like this. I have key concepts. I have learning objectives. I have a chapter, which is a written text, which I generate. I don't have a book for this class because it's a survey class, but over 15 years of teaching the class, I've generated chapter notes, but they're actually written as chapter. And then I have some lectures, which are identical to the chapter if they want me to read it for them. And it's slightly interactive. I'll show you that as well. And then I have the pre-class assignment, which is automatically graded and gets shoved automatically into the Blackboard gradebook. There's homework, and then there's homework, okay? So what does this look like? This is my lecture. I remember last week, somebody who was talking about, last month was video capturing or something like that, and whoever was talking was saying they didn't like Captivate and Camtasia. I use Captivate. This is what it looks like. It's a lecture. I'm able to embed questions so that it becomes an interactive lecture. They can stop and do the question, but they do not have to do this. They can read the chapter. It has the same questions. It's just not interactive. So it doesn't matter to me which way they want to go. They can do either one. They take their pre-class assessment, and then in class, I post questions. So this question is up on the board. They're in their teams. I say, go for it. I walk around the classroom. I say, how you doing? Hey, that looks like a good equation. Oh, you forgot your negative sign there. Really? Do you remember what Ohm's law is? And I will walk around, or I'll have people raise their hand and say, hey, I'm stuck. We don't know what we're doing. And then I'll have the two guys who sit next to each other and look the opposite direction, even though they're teams, and they'll do their opposite little on their own piece of paper, and I'll walk over to them and I'll say, you guys are supposed to be working together. That means you're going to turn your desks, and you're going to face each other, and you're going to talk to each other, and you're going to make sure that each other knows how the problem is done. Okay? So we do those, and that's all I do in class. When they're finished with that problem, I say, how did you do that problem? That's a good, did you do it somewhere else? Did someone else get a different number? Did you do it a different way? And then especially it's cool when people have different ways to come to the same solution, then we get to talk about all the different ways you can problem solve and come to the same end, which is what I want to do. We do homework. I have a recitation time where I'm there to help anyone who wants help on homework, and we just do homework problems. And I will guarantee everybody full points on homework if they come and do it with me. Okay? Because I want them to do it. I don't want them to be stuck with this. So that's how I structure my class. It's all on Blackboard, and they can work ahead if they want or not. Go ahead.
So is the recitation time, is that like office hour? That's not something I'm familiar with.
So I have a unique class in that it's a 3-credit class, but it has a lab. That means I only lecture 2 days a week. I have in-class time 2 days a week, and then I have a lab. Well, in terms of scheduling for classrooms, that leaves this Orphan Friday during my class time, which is not really my class time. And I voluntarily go to the class, and the students voluntarily show up, and there's no requirement. And if I'm on travel, I don't go, and they know that, right? And sometimes the students show up because they have one homework they can't get, and we get that, we work that, and then they leave, right? So it's a structured office hours, I guess, as I'd call it. Okay, and we have the classroom because it's not otherwise occupied. So I use Blackboard a lot because it exists, and I'm highly structured in Blackboard. The idea of doing homework on Blackboard I actually got from Rourke Peterson. I used to hate Blackboard homework because if you miss one problem, you have to do the whole homework set until Rourke says put 1 question per homework. And I'm like, duh. You know, so now I have 1 question. There's only 1 question in each of those, and then they can do it as many times as they want. So anyway, again, I force with a stick, because it is graded, that they do, even though the grade is 1% of the overall grade, that is enough. I force them to come to class knowing what the material is supposed to be so that they can work. And if you don't do that, all is a failure. And then my first semester was a failure because I didn't force them. Then we engage in class, and by the first exam, I show them how well they do compared to pre-flipped. And then they're sold by that time, and they work the rest of the class. And for my freshmen, they get to know each other, which is really powerful for the engineering students.
Yeah, I think Denise does this better than I have, but you need to get students to buy into the model right away, and that's just by setting the expectations early and not blinking. And then Denise at the first exam has been able to show every year that that her students that use the flip method have learned a lot more than the students who from the pre-flipped classes with the same material. And I think it's also really important to explain the benefits to the students. Like, you guys are getting more than your average money's worth because of this class, or from this class, because we're using the flip method. So I sell all kinds of horrible things to students that way. And, they're like, that's basically, as far as I can tell, that's exactly what they give you back on your evaluations. You tell them that they're getting something, more than their money's worth. And then on your evaluations, they say, we got more than our money's worth because she flipped. And so, I do think you have to really explicitly sell it to them. So the next thing is that students don't prepare for class. And this is not a unique thing to the flipped classroom, but it has to be highly incentivized to come to class prepared. Absolutely highly incentivized. And it doesn't matter if you do a quiz that you do at the beginning of class. It doesn't matter if you do a quiz that you do outside of the beginning of class. It doesn't matter if you do a worksheet. I find that my students can't organize their way out of a paper bag. And so the worksheets I force them to organize their content in a way that I find to be logical. And at the end of the semester, they're like, man, those worksheets were great. They really helped us study for the exam. Whoa, really? I'm shocked. It's almost like I designed it that way. And they're like, oh, I never thought of that. Okay. And then you have to have you have to have high incentives, and then you have to hold students accountable for doing their pre-class learning. It's very important. Yeah, students may also not attend lectures. I find that the students who come are the ones who pass the class, but I've had some pretty high drop rates in some of my flipped classes, because they sort of start to not come because they're like, oh, well, I don't have to do this because all the material's online, and then they're not really engaged in the class. So I think that's still a challenging that I'm working with.
It's a challenge for me too, because all of my material is online. All the graded material is online except for the exams. And so frequently the students will say, well, you know, I just do the online stuff. I don't actually have to show up for class. And so there's got to be something engaging in the class activity that the students find valuable, right? And I do take attendance, and it's part of their grade. That's one way that I try to force their attendance, because I believe them practicing problems in my classroom is valuable, even though they don't understand that it's valuable yet, right? So I attempt to force that. But I do have a large number of students who choose not to go to class. And frequently they don't pass the class because of it. But that is a significant problem.
For my class, I have the homework due, or the worksheets that are due at the beginning of class, and they can't do them any other time. So if they don't show up to class, they don't turn in their worksheet, which means that they're not getting those points. And those are pretty highly incentivized.
So Denise, you make the two students roll their desks so they're facing each other.
Yeah.
I wonder what the limit is on that. We have 6 students. There must be some practical limit on how many.
I only do 2.
You only do 2 for your concept.
I pair them up.
Pair.
I don't make bigger groups than that.
Because I've got 6-person teams, and that they would be discussing something. But
Yep.
I just see a kid. In the past, I've tried this with small matters, and I let them sit their desks wherever they wanted, and they would inevitably sit so they weren't looking at each other.
Right.
So
yeah, you teach engineers.
Engineers.
Yeah.
So if I got them to face their desks together, that would be
Right.
a requirement, and that's the kind of thing you'd have to force. You'd have to make them do that.
No, I constantly force my students. I walk through the classroom and I say, move your chair closer to that person.
Yeah.
You're here, their partner. Talk to that person constantly. But I figured I'm teaching freshmen.
Yeah.
And so that's more of an issue.
No, go ahead.
No, I don't think that's true.
But
my
maybe
sophomores and juniors I have to okay, everyone in the class stand on your feet right now.
Yeah.
Move your desk. Now you may sit again. Yes, I'm in charge, so get your butts up.
So your in-class problems, if you only have 2 people, they work together, and so with the 2 of them, they come up with one sheet, one answer.
Yeah, right. So they work as pairs. Everybody's working as pairs. I don't have them turn anything in. When it looks like the majority of the class has slowed down their discussion so that they've actually finished with the problem, so we do maybe 4 to 5 problems per day, then I'll say, okay, where do we start this problem? Someone will say, write Kirchhoff's law at node A. So I say, somebody else tell me what that is. We'll write the equation. Somebody else tell me what's my next step. So again, these are freshmen, and I'm trying to model problem solving. So I actually don't care what the number is out the other end. We talk about what's the step that you took to get, and how do you write those equations down? And that's what we do in class. And then we get to the end, and it's never the same. And I said, okay, how many people got 20.5? Few hands. How many people got 19.6? A few other hands. How many people got 17? Few other hands. I said, okay, where's the problem here? Where did we mess up? And then they'll go back and discuss it and figure out what the problem is.
How about the issues? Now, suppose I have students wanting to, like teaching them how to write a resume. I could have them bring their resume to class. I could make them and then hand it to each other. Now they'd be criticizing and marking up each other's assignment. I don't know if that's legal anymore. Is it? That's okay.
Sure allowed. You can put it in your syllabus explicitly, like this course involves peer review.
Yeah,
if you don't like it, get out.
English, so it's written in. Also, you can structure it so you tell the students you're looking for particular things. Does this student have this in the paper? Can you find evidence of this in the paper? That alleviates that a little bit. but it's written into the syllabus that they have to do peer review.
Have to do peer review and syllabus. Okay, that's,
So to sort of finish up, and then we'll just open it for general discussion. Notice how both Sarah and I lifted up desks and moved them around and forced people to sit next to each other. And so it actually is a little bit difficult to do this in one of those big lecture halls, right, where the desks don't move. You know, it's not impossible. You can force people to get up and move around, you know, and it just, and actually, what's his name? Dari up in Petroleum does a really good job. He's in one of these steep lecture halls where he walks up and makes himself present with the students. You know, and that's really the goal, is to not stand by your slides like we're doing right now, and just chat to your slides. You know, the goal is to be engaged with the students in helping them learn. Oh, the instructor's crushed by preparation.
Yeah, so there's temptation. Yeah, there's
How much time did it take you guys?
Well, Denise and I were both dumb,
Yeah.
frankly. We went whole hog one semester, did the whole class. We do not recommend that to anybody, to anyone ever. And it works, sort of. But you can get crushed. But you don't have to be crushed. You don't have to make your own materials. Like, does it really matter that, like, it's my face on, like, the show and tell, like, look, this is how to work this kind of problem? Or would it have been just as valuable to my students if I, you know, every other video had them go to Khan Academy? Would that make a difference? I mean, they still see me. I'm still helping them. If I'm still engaging with the material and and we're all engaging with the same material, does it matter that I generated it? Or does it matter that I generated all of it? I would argue no. So you don't have to make your own materials. You don't have to make them all. I would also advocate for making a friend at eLearning, because their job, from my perspective, is to lower the activation barrier for me to learn the tools that I need to make this happen. And I was a little late to that party, and I ended up teaching myself a lot of things that just sort of got me by, when I could have just gone straight for, you know, some actual expertise and learned how to do it right the first time.
And I want to reiterate that, you know, I mean, I actually ended up with an NSF grant to mess with my class. So I had some other support. But the more I've looked at this, the more I noticed that other people who have attempted to flip the recommendation is that you flip the end of your class, take the last month of your class and just do that. Don't try to do the first of your class and then go back to lecture. That's a bad scene, and everybody who's done that has said that it's not worked well. But if you do what they expect, and then at the end of the class you say, well, we're going to flip these few classes, you know, that's actually taken a lot better. You don't have to do your own videos. You can just ask them to read the book. That's okay, but you have to make sure they do it. And that's the force. You have to make sure that they do it, right? This idea of flipped classroom is not unique. It's what we used to have to do, right? Read the book, come to class prepared to work, you know. But people are so used to doing other things these days that you have to go back and swap them upside the head, force them back into this mode of, yes, come to class prepared, so that we can do interesting stuff. So, question in the back?
You've both done one class, two classes?
One class for 3 years each.
Okay.
So I actually, my freshman class is fully flipped, but I use a lot of the same active learning techniques in my junior level class.
So yeah, my question is are you planning on doing more? And maybe a follow-up to that is, do you see maybe a class you're teaching now that you would not want for any reason to
I don't see any class that I wouldn't flip.
Okay.
Do I want to be crushed and do it another time? Not right now. But anytime you can include any active learning of any sort into your classroom and not read the book to your students, the better off your students will be.
Yeah, I would say, sorry, Mary, can you
Well, you finished that.
yeah, I would say this is my third curriculum development project since I got here 4 years ago. So no. Well, this was my first. This was really my first one, but yeah, there's certainly. I think that any time you're incorporating active learning into the classroom, like your students are going to learn more, and if you sell it right, it's going to be a better experience for everyone. So yeah, I don't think that there's necessarily anything I wouldn't want to flip, but again, it's a lot of work, so I don't think I have to get tenure.
Is it more work than a non-flip classroom?
Yeah, but in kind of a surprising way.
Yeah.
Because now you took all that stuff out that you were going to teach in class. So like, maybe preparing your lectures is only like, maybe preparing the videos is only slightly more work than preparing a lecture. But now you have 3 hours a week and you have to figure out something that you're going to do with all of these people. And it has to be singing and dancing because you're not singing and dancing anymore. So you have to figure out how to get them to sing and dance for 3 hours a week. That is, from my perspective, the more challenging because we all know how to lecture. We can learn. We can all figure out how to make a video, or figure out how to send them to Khan Academy. For me, the hurdle there is definitely what am I going to do with these people in class to keep that fresh.
And I want to reinforce that lecturing is the easiest way to teach. I can lecture freshmen cold, hungover, half asleep, because I know so much more than they know. I can walk in and just do it. And it costs me nothing to lecture to my freshmen. But to actually find problems that are interesting, to find engagement points for them. I mean, again, I failed miserably the first year I tried to do this. I did all the things that are ways to fail. I touched every single one of them. Finding something to do for the students that causes them to want to be in your class is probably one of the most difficult things. So there's a lot of upfront work, but after 3 years, it's not any more difficult to teach this class as a flipped than it was to teach it as a lecture class. It's just different upfront work. And you can choose to naively do it all at once, or you can choose to, do a little at a time. So the website that we have is flip.community.uaf. Sarah has some class examples and tells you how she does pen casting and lectures and stuff. I have a discussion of my class, what works, what doesn't work. I have some exam scores up there for just because some statistics about I'm a numbers person, did it work, did it not work for me? And you're welcome to go and review that. There's a bunch of literature and other resources, directions to other resources on the page. And so I guess at this point we can just open it up. Anybody who wants to know anything.
I think Rick had a point.
Oh, well, you guys mostly answered it. My question was about the workload. Do you feel like now that you've got all the out of class materials, I'm obviously still with some tweaking, but you have all those, and I imagine you're starting to work out what works and what doesn't work in class. Do you see like 3 or 4 years from now the workload being less onerous and more rewarding, or do you see yourself continuing to mess with things?
I think you actually had a good point about your flip classroom, the difficulty of maintaining connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, a lot of the stuff in my 200 level class is stuff that's pretty far outside of, like, it's stuff that I don't do every day. So Denise can come in hungover and perhaps even, asleep and lecture. I have to work. I have to do this again and again because it's me. Like, my engagement is what's required, and that's what I found to be more difficult to maintain with the flipped method. So I think it depends on how comfortable you are with the material that's in your class.
And if it's outside of your comfort zone, it might still take, it might take a lot of effort to stay engaged for your own preparation.
And it's true, you make these videos or you write this book and you forget what you said. I made it 2 years ago. What did I say there? Oh, that's part of this module? Oh, thanks for letting me know. Unless you review it, you kind of forget that. But I think the level of work ends up coming back to the same level of work I would do in a regular lecture class.
But you have strong evidence supporting that your students learn a lot more.
Yeah, I do.
I would just echo the comments that you made, having flipped classrooms before, that the incentivization is a big key issue. The other thing I would emphasize that you guys pointed out as well is the fact that there has to be the added value. And the added value is important not only for your students, because they're going, oh, here's why I want to be there, but it's also important for you because that's the driver. One of the things I learned was that, and it's kind of like the first time experience in a grocery store or a Sam's Club or something. You go in and you're overwhelmed by all the things that you would normally look for. Say I was teaching a class in a lecture mode. Instead, what you learn is that, oh, I can become very selective. I know exactly what sorts of materials I'm looking for now that I'm no longer focused on, the for lack of a better term, the sort of standardized content piece. And in a lot of ways, one of the things that I discovered was it's a lot more freeing. All of a sudden, I'm getting the opportunity to do something that I know results in greater engagement, which in turn, as Denise pointed out, results in greater learning on my students' part.
So I just want to put a final nail in the coffin of convincing people that this is worthwhile. We do have this faculty learning community on flipped classrooms. It's got a lot of very interesting stuff here. One of the things is the class examples, which I like to go to. So this is my class example, and I'm just going to scroll down here to the exams. All right, so let's see here. This is exam 1. I'm going to see if I can make this smaller. So 2012 and 2013 are pre-flipped. It's a freshman class, large distribution of grades, large skill sets in the freshman class. 2014 was the class that didn't work very well. It's the first time I flipped. But you can see already that all of these very small, people who just kind of were hanging out half asleep in my class, they're all pulled up. It's the lower people that get pulled up because they can review the lecture time a lot. And they get a lot of support in class. By the time I was in 2015, I gave more A's on that exam than I have ever given in the past 15 years of teaching this class. I was actually quite astounded. For the second exam, and this is effectively the same exam. For the second exam, again, wide distribution in the pre-flipped. 2014, they kind of revolted against me after the first exam. And so they're back to kind of the pre-flipped. It really got bad in that semester. But I turned it around for 2015. And again, I have a guy who was ready to drop there. But again, I gave more A's on this exam than I'd ever given in the past 15 years of teaching the class. So for me, that was a real strong indication that these students were getting more out of the class. And finally, for the final, is the same thing. The final is totally skewed. I practically have to change my exam now because it's too easy for most of my students. Whereas in the past, the pre-flipped, it really was, if they could get them to get 60s, I was really happy, So for me, just looking at the exam scores, it was so drastically different by them having the support of being able to do problems constantly over and over and over again, practice. So anyway, go ahead, Desiree.
So I've been to several lectures on, or several meetings on flipped classrooms, and went to a conference last year. My question, flipped classrooms are usually done for engineering and classes where you can see evidence of learning right away. And writing classes, that's just not the case.
Hmm.
And so I was thinking it's possible. I just couldn't figure out
But I think,
writing. And so, especially the grading part of it, how do you assess? And you mentioned you do yours in modules, and I never thought about that. So I could do the class in modules and grade by module. So you just solved a really big problem.
so I think it's interesting that you said that, because I always thought that the English teachers had it over on us engineers. Because, you know, what is your in-class activity? You write, you critique, you do all the things that people should, you know, you're already active. You know, do you really just stand up there and talk to your, no, you have them, don't you?
Yeah, but we have textbooks, and the textbooks have explanations for every part of, you know, for an exemplification paper, for a definition paper, for an analysis paper, and they still have to learn the framework of the paper before writing it.
Yeah.
So that part I flipped.
But do you not have
fine.
them write in class and critique in class and you review in class?
So at the developmental level and the intro to writing level, part of that is grammar, which I flipped,
Got it.
right? So
Uh-huh.
now they do just the, but I found it was easier to flip the class during the summer when I had the students Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for an hour. And, you know, so the first time I flipped was last year, one of my 109. So I did one not flipped and one flipped and watched.
And how did it work for you?
Utter failure.
The flipped was an utter
The
failure?
flip was an utter failure,
Really?
right? So then I did it that summer. Absolute, like, knockdown, drag out success. But still, I couldn't figure out the grading part of it. So this semester, I have a smaller class. It's not flipped, but this summer, I'm flipping again.
Cool.
And now I've got the grade portion figured out, because you work in modules. Why can't I work in modules and grade that way?
Yeah, go for it.
So
You should talk to Zoe about her English class.
okay.
Yeah, they do a lot of mashups and critiques and reviews and writing together.
Mhm.
You know?
We do, and a lot of my work is, I love Blackboard, because I teach
I
both
hate
in
Blackboard. but I use
face-to-face
it
and
in-
online. And I use Screencast-O-Matic for some things. But like I said, it's a lower level developmental writing class. Sometimes it's difficult, and it's easier during the summer. But my goal is to flip it during a fall semester
Cool.
with 30 kids in the room. And so I'm going to give it another shot in the fall with one of the classes. But it's definitely easier to flip during the summer when it's not a Tuesday, Thursday. You don't see them for 5 days class. It's easier to see them.
Great. Well, don't want to hold folks back. It's been terrific having Denise and Sarah here. Thank you a lot. You guys. Pizza here, so if you want to take a piece of pizza with you, you're more than welcome. And upcoming, there are a couple more Thursdays coming up, dealing with, I think the next one is assessment and then rubrics. So if you have an interest in that, watch for the faculty flyer that we'll send out. Otherwise, gosh, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Yes, Denise. Absolutely. We solve a huge problem. Nobody is for me. I'm sure.
Good, yeah, it was good, yeah, that's what, fantastic, yeah, good. And I know yours was, it wasn't so, it wasn't, it was.
But that's, it's still gonna
Yeah, it's no big deal, yeah. But I'm trying to assess that whether everybody's, like, especially, yeah, you know, our bad preparation for higher. I wonder, do you guys?
Make sure you sign that yellow pad. If you didn't, please also keep the bean counters off our
The senior
backs. So we
folks
can
that I've
get
talked
in
to,
there.
it's just like,
They don't do peer review
and then.
Oh, sure. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
You know, because we're the models we do.
Narrative.
Yeah.
First draft, I never even check it off.
I would let as many kids of you. Can I chat with you after this? I just think we're getting awkward.
Then it goes.
I'm sorry we were sitting there. It was very hard for her.
Absolutely. Glad you
And then
liked
we
it.
just kind of got off on, we took your idea and then we're like, okay, well, what would it work? How could we do that? So I'm sorry.
I see all the time.
I think I've heard from other people that I'm not easy to
Yes.
Yeah, you both are very
Blackboard
good.
course, all my grading form.
Anyway, but she said, that, you know, like the PowerPoints were very useful. I mean, because it was like a lot of the same stuff. So just kind of got off on, okay, well, what could we do?
Yeah. I think,
Yeah, that solves it. Right on.
We'll have a chat with her. And the other thing is that you can actually.
Well, I want to do a conference, like 20, it's a conference presentation, because the last conference I went to, they didn't know,
Right.
They didn't know good ideas on how to do it, especially if you're writing intro level.
Right.
Not upper level, sure, it's easier. Not at this level, there's so many concepts.
Sure.
They don't even remember
Right.
seeing them and answering them. So
Be
those,
careful about IRB approval though, if you're using student work to do research.
why would I have them sign consent forms at the beginning of the semester?
That is part of it, that's fine, but you still have to have the institution research board approve that because it's research.
Okay,
It's a
so,
legal issue. And
So-
it's easy. And you can talk to me about that too, because I had to do the class for the NSF grant.
okay,
But yes, you have to ask permission, but you also have to ask for approval.
okay, so I've been using some of their essays with the
Right.
consent form.
Right.
But I haven't put any of those for public view aside from in my class, like the copy.
Right.
You can copy 15 copies for your students in
Right.
class, but it hasn't gone that far.
No, but if you want to do a paper or a conference thing, you're supposed to have IRB.
Okay.
It's, you basically ask for IRB and then you say, this is for a class, I want an exemption. And they give it to you. So, but it's a formality.
Will you be able to tell me how to?
Yes,
Okay.
I can, because I had to do that for my class.
I have the worst of both worlds. See, I have a writing intensive class for engineers.
That's horrible.
And I had 40 students in it last semester. 40 students, and all these writing assignments. So that's one reason I'm trying to come up with some better thing. And I tried active learning. We're having, you know, it didn't work because I had too many students.
Yeah.
This semester,
But
I've only
Rourke
got,
does, but because it's writing, but Rourke has 60 students in the class and he flips.
Yeah. So-
You know.
yeah. So I
But
think
yeah, I
it's-
don't know how to do it. Writing is just hard because I'm so glad I'm not an English teacher.
But I'm thinking, I may try using Google Docs
Uh-huh.
and having them correct your lab. Governor
Is
work
that
on
what you
Google
do?
Docs.
Oh, yeah, you have to, it's the
Yeah.
best.
Yeah.
Google Docs.
So that's what you need to do, is you need to connect with Desiree, who teaches developmental English and figures out how students write essays or whatever. You just have them.
That's how they peer review.
It's a living legend.
On Google Docs.
Yeah, because they can be on one document and they both can.
You put them in a group though, I mean, so they only see the people in their group?
Yeah.
So you put them in
Sometimes
groups?
they're in pairs if the class is large. Some of my classes have 30 students and they're in groups of 3 and 4.
Groups of 3 and 4 on Google Docs. Okay, yeah, so that's great minds think this. I was going in that direction. I just haven't got very far with that.
Yeah, and Google Docs has a feature called Kaizena.
You have not heard of that.
Kaizena is, so I can make a comment and I can speak it and write it. So I don't have to like type everything. Kaizena will record me saying, I'm highlighting this part because it's great. So every time the student clicks on it, they can hear my voice and it's not all writing.
And what is it, Kaizen?
Yeah, it's Kaizena. And it's, you know, you get it through the drive,
Yeah,
they say extra.
It's a Google Doc add-on.
It's an add-on, I'm sorry, yeah,
Google Doc.
But
Yeah.
you can
You
get
can
it, just
only
go to
get to it-
Kaizen.com.
yes. So, if
I've
we're,
never heard
that's really.
I can't keep up with all this.
No, that's me too.
I can't even keep up with Blackboard. I think I got a handle on something. Google changes everything. Oh, my God.